Bienvenidos a Startup Inside Stories de Itnig, un podcast donde hablamos de startups, negocio y tecnología. Podéis verlo en itnig.net/podcast y escucharlo a través de Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, iVoox y otras plataformas.
Welcome to Itnig Podcast. This week we have Tyson Kallberg as a guest. How are you, Tyson?
I'm good, doing well, thank you.
Thanks for being here. And we have Marcos from Kipu. How are you, Marcos?
Pretty good.
Good. I'm Jordi, CEO of Factorial. So today we're going to talk a little bit about project management, collaboration, SaaS, product, design, a little bit of everything. And Tyson, why didn't you start telling us a little bit, who are you? Where do you come from?
Yeah, I'll try not to start from the very beginning. I have been at Asana for about 5.5 years. And then before that, I lived up in Vancouver, Canada, where I worked at a mobile development design consultancy for about 5 years. Ran a team of 6 people there. I joined them way back when the iPhone came out. They were sort of a Cocoa shop, and when the iPhone released, all of a sudden Cocoa shops were very in demand, obviously. So I started as the first designer there and grew a team. Before that, I worked mainly freelance graphic design. I worked at a baby furniture manufacturer for a little while. Yeah, it was not that exciting, and I will not name the baby furniture manufacturer. But yeah, I learned a lot about primarily mobile when I was working at the company before Asana. Basically, we were doing iOS, Android, BlackBerry back in the day, Symbian back in the day, for basically Fortune 500 companies, primarily consumer, but with a little bit of enterprise as well. Yeah, I wanted to get out of consultancy, and I wanted to move to San Francisco, because apparently that's where everything's happening. I guess that's true.
Where are you originally from?
Vancouver. Born and raised Vancouver, yeah. So SF was the first time I grew up in the country, so I went to Vancouver at one point proper. But yeah, definitely SF was my first big move. I moved to Asana actually as a product designer. Started, I think, 3 or 4 months before Marcos did. Worked on the mobile native app redesigns for Android and iOS. I'd been managing a team before, and I wanted to kind of go back into design. That moment of like losing your craft or wondering existentially, like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life? And I found after about 1.5 years that it was. So I started managing product designers then, eventually started managing all the product designers. And about 2.5 years ago, our old head of design moved on to Facebook, and I kind of grabbed the reins from there.
Okay, well, interesting story. So tell us a little bit more about what is Asana doing. Like, most people know the product, I'm sure, but give us some perspective.
Doing pretty well, it seems. I think Asana is... We always somewhat have struggled with how to describe it. And some people think it's project management. Some people think it's collaboration. There's quickly a category developing called work management or work tracking. And that's a really good descriptor of what we do. Effectively, Asana wants to be able to help everyone understand how the work they're doing in the day-to-day can really connect up to the missions, objectives, the things that are driving the company at a high level. So aspirationally, that's where we're heading. So in a lot of ways, the features that we launch have really been about projects and tasks in the past, and we're starting to sort of move beyond that now. Okay.
And what would be another solution that's kind of similar to Asana? What would the competitors be?
I'll not list the exhaustive list of competitors.
No, let's just say the most famous ones people already know.
Smartsheet, who IPO'd a little while ago. They're probably sort of the most public of them. Trello, certainly that kind of ilk. There's in sort of the distance, you can think of people like, Jira and Atlassian are also in that space. I mean, Atlassian owns Trello, so by nature of that.
There are a lot of competitors trying to jump into that space. Like I heard, like Dropbox tried to kind of get in there, and like other ones I don't know. But
it's interesting because a lot of people are like, "Oh, are you competing with Slack?" And the answer is no. We're not competing with Slack. We really try to think about the things you need to do your work. There's things like messaging. There's things like data storage, which is clearly Dropbox, and then work tracking is kind of this new emergent thing. So we sort of saw messaging blow up. Obviously, seeing Slack doing as well as it is, but we definitely think them as more synergistic and complementary products right now, rather than direct competitors.
Okay. And do you know a bit the story of Asana? Where does it come from?
Yeah, definitely know that. I mean, the shortest version of that story is Dustin and Justin were working at Facebook. They were sort of fed up about how work was being done. They developed an internal product that Facebook, I believe, still uses to this day. And at some point, they're like, oh, this actually might be a really healthy business. I think that was in about 2009-ish. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they basically left Facebook together, formed Asana, and started going from there. I think our public launch was 2012. 12 or so. I could be wrong on that number. So there's kind of like a bit of slow going early. But yeah, Justin's really got a very strong vision as far as wanting to make work more effective. He's super passionate about the amount of time we waste doing, bureaucratic bullshit, frankly. I also should have asked them all. I swear on this podcast.
Okay.
But it's happened now. So, but yeah, really, a lot of it comes from their sort of frustrations and angers with work that they've experienced, and not just on the product side, but from a purely cultural and workplace side. We often talk about Asana sort of having two products: one being the actual product that we do, and the other being the company and the culture that have been built up sort of from their brainchild in a lot of ways.
And do you think the fact that the company was founded by former founders of Facebook, and the amount of money that these guys had when they started the company, had any effect in the marketplace, in the industry, in the sector?
I think that we have, yes. I mean, the short answer
billionaire
is
founders
certainly yes.
Every day.
Well, and a lot of. We want to be seen as like beyond just like, oh, Dustin's startup.
Yeah.
Like that's definitely what you see in the press.
But there's a part of that is actually what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it would be ignorant to say that none of our success is riding at all on them. And I think it was certainly helpful to sort of get that word out early. That being said, the company has definitely taken on a life of its own. And the growth we're seeing is way beyond any of, their initial amounts of ability to fund and things like that.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about this growth. What are the figures that we can share? Do you know the revenue of the company at the moment?
I can't talk about the revenue at the moment, obviously, but we just raised in January again to get the 1.5 billion valuation, which was a big deal for us. It was the second raise in a year, mainly capitalizing on momentum, to be honest. So at that time,
how much money in total did the company raise?
I think the raise was only 50. Around there. And at that time, we had 100 million in ARR. And the sort of big success story about that was 8 quarters of consecutive growth. So we're seeing pretty fantastic growth rates, especially at that scale of revenue.
Okay. How many customers or something like that?
60,000 paid customers at that moment.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm assuming the average size of customer is also growing over time, right? At the beginning, I'm sure it was like mom and pops or Soho.
Yeah, totally. Office. Small, medium businesses were certainly sort of that bread and butter. And a lot of how Asana is operated is very much a bottoms-up model. We have a freemium pricing strategy. The idea with that is that we didn't have to have a huge sales team to go out and get these leads. So early on, a lot of our customers were these small businesses. And it's still like a meaningful percentage of them are. But we're seeing as, we're getting more attention and the categories, frankly, getting more attention, that we're moving more up market and we're seeing larger and larger customers. And customers not necessarily just in tech. So a lot of our early customers were, early adopters, people at tech companies, frankly. And as time's gone on, we're seeing people in, less conventional industries, things like, we have a large HVAC company that runs on Asana, things like that. So we're definitely sort of expanding that user base as time goes on.
And do you have salespeople now?
Yeah, we definitely have a sales team. So ideally, we're sort of targeting a hybrid model where we keep getting that sort of self-service, bottoms-up kind of revenue, while also, especially with larger companies, a lot of those are sales mandatory. It stops being that little team that builds it up and more like you're talking to a stakeholder at the high end. And in that way, a sales team is very helpful.
You're still in freemium, right?
Yes.
That's the same theory. I think when I was there, that was the whole point of it is we don't want to be top bottom. We want to be bottom up. We want people to just adopt the tool and eventually the team growing into the tool and having to just purchase it. I think that Airtable and other software Slack and other ones
Slack and Zoom. I mean, they're two massive successful IPOs that are going on right now. They're great advocates of this bottoms up, right?
Yeah.
So one person gets the software, eventually pulls out the credit card. Eventually, procurement decides to buy for everybody.
Yeah, and that's still very much core to the philosophy is this idea of we want software that is great to use, so that the people, the companies become advocates for it.
That's a new thing. I mean, that was not a thing 10 years ago.
Yeah,
that's definitely a wave that's been invented by this category of companies. That's a really interesting pattern.
Yeah, that sort of new wave SaaS very much is very user centric, very design centric, and then also we want to empower people who are doing the work to make the decisions rather than having them be these big top top-down decisions. It also means the company isn't sales-driven in the way that enterprise companies are historically sales-driven. So you think of people like Salesforce, where you basically build a product that is good enough, and then you just juice the hell out of it with sales, and that's it. And then a lot of the product development is driven by sales and customer requests rather than product thinking. And we definitely self-describe ourselves as a product-led company. And while that means we have a really nice link between product and business, obviously, it's not the case that, sales is driving the entire roadmap of Asana.
Yeah, I mean, actually, like, people love the tool. Like, people love the software and just the culture around it. Like, to the point that some people ended up like loving it so much that joined the company eventually. Like, I know people that just used it, make like the whole company use it. Eventually, when they see a position, just go for it. And ended up, like, I have friends that still work at Asana. That's how they got in there.
Yeah, our new head of customer success was a huge Asana champion. And he was helping. He had a very good story of, like, he was helping, I forget exactly which medical thing he was dealing with, but basically like rehabilitation and like opioid epidemic. He was running a lot of that, and then that was kind of trucking. So he came over and started to help us. So
Tyson, you mentioned something that's really interesting. You said that customers are not only tech companies anymore, right? Like, that's implying that they used to be mostly tech companies,
right?
And I think that's part criticism, part jealousy from other parts of the world. Where in the Bay Area, if you start a product for startups and for tech companies, the ecosystem, the bubble, the echo chamber, however you want to call it, is so strong that you can actually make millions and millions in revenues just by selling to the gang, not just by selling to the other startups.
Yeah, and
VC-backed companies and so on.
And over the past couple of years, we've seen a lot more global expansion. So we're seeing, very impressive revenue coming from outside the United States, which I think is really good proof for us that we've like kind of busted out of that. Because there's definitely an echo chamber, and there's definitely this moment of like, we were pretty diligently targeting those kind of folks early on.
Yeah,
because
it's fair.
Because there's a lot of money.
Right?
Exactly.
You're a company trying to make revenues, and it helps you like grow so fast when everybody's using you. Everybody in a confined area.
Yeah.
But everybody is using Slack. Everybody is using Zoom. Everybody is maybe using Asana. And that helps grow and then eventually break this. I
wanna add something there. Like, how much do you think you go for, like, because when I was there, I felt that it's easier to sell to these companies because they're open to try new things. They just want to be more effective and they want to like
super
improve.
Innovative companies.
And it's easier to go to a startup and say like, okay, just try this new software, and they just will be on board with it. And I think that's also part of it. Besides, like also like the
we often describe it as like we're targeting early adopters, and that just implies these kind of very tech savvy companies that are willing to try new tools and new processes. And because the category is starting to form up, and there's a lot of people starting to do what we do or have been doing what we do. Now the companies who are maybe not on that early adopter side, more on that laggard side, are like, oh, I heard there's this thing I need to see. So that's kind of the tip we're seeing now. It was similar with Slack, where it was like, oh, what is this instant messaging thing? And then there was like a critical mass of people that it kind of flipped, and now everyone is using it. So the hope is we see a similar thing happen.
So what was the stage of the company when you two guys joined more or less at the same time? How many people? How many customers?
Like 60 people when I interviewed.
Yeah, I think I was like 45 people, somewhere in there. So pretty early days.
How many now?
Just over 450-ish globally.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
and not in San Francisco anymore.
No, we have an office in New York. We have an office in San Francisco, an office in Dublin, and we're probably opening. We'll have feet on the ground in Tokyo soon.
Oh wow!
We have a development office in Vancouver now. Hometown pride, obviously.
You've been to almost all of them, no, Marcos?
I've been to. I was like the only person to work in all of the offices back in the day.
We have one in Reykjavik now. There's an Australia presence. So, we're going pretty big. And mainly, you got to think of it as a response to the fact that as we see, we're getting really serious about global, it makes sense, especially with time zones and sales presence and support, it makes sense to have more feet on the ground.
Speaking of global, what do you think would have happened if Asana was founded in New York instead of San Francisco?
I don't know is probably the easiest answer to that.
Or Vancouver, maybe.
Vancouver doesn't have a great track record of great tech. I think Hootsuite's probably the most impressive number of any of them that people know about outside of Vancouver. They just laid off 100 people, which is not great. I think there's definitely... you have to ask yourself a question with our founders, would they have founded it anywhere else? And, to your question initially, which is like, did the founders have an effect on our success? Like, very likely. And their success was from San Francisco, so it kind of makes sense. So I think it's this question of, would that group of people have gotten together under those set of circumstances in another city? I would like to hope, idealistically, that it doesn't matter where you're founded. It matters what the quality of your product is and what the reach is.
So let me phrase it a different way. Imagine there is a couple of founders that are listening to this podcast right now, and they're coming up with the next Asana. The idea that's going to kill Asana.
Yeah.
We hope it doesn't happen, but maybe it happens. And maybe these two guys have this really, really brilliant idea, and they're considering starting a company. Would you move to the Bay Area to start a company?
I don't have a great answer to that question. I want to say no. I want to believe that, like, it's the internet and it shouldn't matter where you're based. I think that there's a market in San Francisco that is just a ton of people with a ton of money who are excited about new technology. So whether you're founded in San Francisco or you market towards San Francisco, I think is more of the question. So it's more, do you want to exploit that audience more so than does it matter where you're founded? So to those founders, I think there's a question of like, is the market opportunity bigger there? You have to wonder, with the space heating up in the way that it is, whether or not that's still the right stage of company to go after. Or have we kind of crossed that tipping point and now you should be able to come up with a work management product no matter where you are, because the market is seemingly more hungry for that than it was.
We're talking about San Francisco a lot in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But I think, and I've heard that a lot of people are moving to Dallas, apparently.
There's definitely a couple of places that are popping up. San Francisco's been seeing... San Francisco is a city that is fraught with many issues, expense and other things included. You're definitely seeing a lot of folks kind of break out. Remote work is becoming super popular.
Stripe is just launching a huge hub that is purely remote, right?
Yep. Envision is only remote. Like, all of their employees are remote. They have like an offsite to come together, but otherwise they're entirely remote. So that's becoming more of a common trend. So I think you're seeing folks in SF being like, well, if I can go and live in Northern California or Colorado or Oregon or something like that, and cost of living drops, but I can still work for a tech company with a great wage, why wouldn't I? And then you're also seeing just like hubs like Denver's become quite popular. You're seeing who's over there. Gusto's over there. Slack is over there. Microsoft is probably over there. You're seeing a lot of these companies open up offices in places like Denver as well.
Which, thanks to Asana, people can work remotely now.
Yes, that is the promise. Interestingly, like, as a company, we definitely are getting better at this as we do more offices, but we still don't have a ton of remote employees, like pure remote employees.
I mean, reflecting on this topic, probably, an Asana killer potential new startup would be, mostly small SME companies, so they don't need a face-to-face direct sales force, so they could do that remotely. They would mostly be organic, growth, SEO, and stuff like that, which you can do from anywhere.
Yeah.
Venture capital is something that's definitely stronger in the Bay Area, but it's also been maturing a lot outside. Like, I remember when we were trying to raise our Series A at our previous company, Redbooth, also in the space of Asana, we tried to pitch SaaS in Barcelona, and most people didn't really know any SaaS businesses here. And we actually moved to San Francisco to raise our Series A there. But for Factorial, for our company now, that changed a lot. So in the last 5-6 years, the market matured a lot. And I guess VC is not the challenge anymore. The only question is talent, right?
Yeah.
So where is the talent?
Yeah, I mean, I moved to San Francisco, like,
But you were not there, right? So
no.
as talent, right? As somebody who joined Asana to contribute to its talent pool.
I think that San Francisco has a draw, though, this idea that if you go down there, you'll be among really great talent. Like, I definitely think a big motivating factor for me was, like, seeing people I really respected move down there and being like, oh, I kind of want to be where the action's happening. So I think, I don't know how true this is today, given that I haven't, like, gone out in the labor market, but there's definitely still this like cachet. I think especially from outside the city, people in San Francisco are, I don't know, you get jaded and bitter and those things. I think I'm still pretty happy about most stuff, but like from outside, SF still feels like this weird jewel of a city where like, oh my God, I can go there and get my like, all my tech dreams will come true. And I think it still has a bit of that cachet. So I think whether or not the talent exists elsewhere, I think good talent is still drawn to the idea of it. So you're going to have people like me who decided not to go to another company in Vancouver, decided very, very intentionally to say, no, the tech scene here sucks. I'm moving to San Francisco because I want to I fully thought I was going to move there, spend about 2 or 3 years, do my 1,000,000-hour weeks, and do my tour and go back to Vancouver and be like, look, I got my San Francisco resume credit. Now I can get a job wherever I want in Vancouver. But it definitely had that draw. And I think that's a weird thing about talent is like this sort of gravitational pull that SF tends to have.
So before we move on to actually design, product, and so on, which I think is super interesting, you just mentioned work culture, right? You said 100,000 million-hour weeks. Is that what's happening in the Bay Area?
I think there was a perception the answer is yes at some companies, certainly.
So what's an okay, work week?
Oh, for me, Asana's great. I mean,
not just for you, like on average or the median.
That's a good question. I don't have hard stats for that, so I'm going to be pulling them out of my butt.
Your friends.
But I feel like the 60 to 80 hour week thing is a thing. It's a thing that people talk about. It's this idea of oh my God, I'm going to work the weekends. I'm going to work these 12-hour days. We're in crunch, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that was certainly the perception that, especially for smaller startups, I think still exists today. I think there's more of a focus on work-life balance maybe today than there was 5 years ago. Yeah, they're horror stories of these really long weeks where you're like, I'm not going to go home. I'm just going to work.
I mean, while I was there, and my experience is really weird because I just moved from Barcelona to San Francisco straight to Asana.
You had never been to San Francisco.
I've never been to a real company of like that. I visited some friends that work at Dropbox and Facebook, and you will see them working on a Saturday. It's what are you doing? Because the culture at Asana from the first day is work hard, play hard. Play hard, work hard. I never remember the order, but it means just do your best work and then just go home. For example, you don't have dinner on Fridays at Asana. They have a cafeteria where you get all your meals every day.
You have dinner every other day.
Yeah, but you don't have dinner on Fridays. They're just go ahead, live your life, be happy, and then come back on Monday when you're rested and you're well.
I think that. Sorry.
No, go ahead. What do you think? How much Dustin and Justin have to do with this culture at Asana?
Entirely. I think that, the food thing's an interesting aspect of it because food, you heard about the freshman 15 when he moved to Facebook or Apple or Google where it's you're going to eat a bunch of food and you're going to gain weight. And I remember starting at Asana and being oh my God, I get free food. This is great. I'm in a new city. And I lost weight because it's super healthy. And the main motivation behind, I think there's a lot of this you get 3 meals a day. They're trying to keep you there longer hours. I think that's the perception.
Yes.
And the reality is if you look at the attendance, that's definitely not true. A lot of as far as lunch is very well attended, obviously, and then dinner is much less attended than lunch. We employ a lot of folks with families or who have commutes, and it shouldn't feel like you're forced to stay. So the motivation behind the food is less let's keep people here, and more if we give people not crap food, it's a great chance to socialize with your coworkers. As a manager who has a ton of meetings, it's a really great way to make sure I eat well. Even if I only have 15 or 30 minutes, I can get a whole plate of food. I don't feel like crap. So from Dustin's and Justin's standpoint, they've had a culinary staff for long before I got there.
Donnie was employee number 6.
Yeah, they've been doing the food thing.
Employee number 6 was the cook.
It was 6 or 10, yeah, really early. And a lot of it was Dustin had ruined himself to some degree at Facebook with the way that, they behaved and they ate. And I think a lot of this is I don't want people to make that same mistake. I want people to actually try to be healthy. So the food is really motivated by that more than anything else. And there definitely is not having the whole crunch time thing is a double-edged sword. Because in some ways you're yes, this is great. I can work reasonable hours. If I have a family or a life outside of work, I can actually engage with it. And then you kind of start asking these questions could we be working harder? Is that the edge? And I think, objectively, no, that's not the point. Recharging makes you more effective in the hours that you are there. And I think everyone at the company deeply believes that. And, I've seen 10x growth in employees, and that's, definitely one of the things we've held on to is we're not that kind of company where we're going to grind our people into the ground. If we're going to meet a deadline, there are going to be times when people will work weekends, but those are going to be an exception, not a rule.
Okay. So let's move now a little bit more into the hard work that you guys do over there. So tell us, you're head of design at Asana. What does it mean to be head of design?
So to give a little context on the team, we're about I think 24 today.
Product designers.
No, so we have a unified team. So it's not quite half and half. It's a little more product, but it's product design and brand design. So product design being basically anything that you see in a native app or in the application itself. That's mainly a product design led initiative, and then literally anything else is brand design. And then there's a lot of
a blog, a banner, PR.
Like all of our launch campaigns, all of like feature launches, any kind of brand campaign, all of our internal sort of swag and events, anything, literally anything that's not the app.
So that's 25 in total.
Yeah, and
like 8 and 16
are you counting front end?
No engineers. So the team consists of, there's product designers, all generalists. So we don't do sort of visual design, interaction design, specialization. And then we're split into 3 pillars on the product side. So we adopt the 3-legged stool, the triad, the 3 in a box. There's like a million names for it. But the idea of like that PM design engineer sort of core, sort of you can see at every level of abstraction. So whether that be at a program level, which we call our teams, at the pillar level, and then kind of across the pillars, you'll see the same structure. And then all teams will have a research and data scientists paired with them to help them with qualitative and quantitative insights.
So one question I forgot to ask: Are you like a technical product designer, or more like artistic product designer, or businessy product designer?
I think a good product designer is all of those things. It's not, certainly as we think about
what's before
for me,
where did you come from? Like,
where did you study? Where did you come from?
Notably, I did not go to school, which makes immigration hard. But
tell me.
Yeah, I think I'd probably describe myself as an artistic designer, if only because I don't think a lot of designers who grew up in the era that, you and I grew up in, had a lot of exposure to things that product designers do now. Like, the closest thing to interaction design when I was growing up as a designer was like HCI degrees, and those weren't really attended by designers. They were attended by people who were designing interfaces like the mouse or things like that. So I think in a sense, the definition that we have as a product designer today is vastly different than anything I grew up in. So certainly an artistic background, I thought I was going to be in film and photography when I was really young. My dad's a photographer. Like that was definitely part of me. So I think that's where I came from.
And your team, do you think it's mostly the same profile, like more the visual aspect, or the other two?
The answer to that is we try to find a balance, right? So if you think of the sort of product design process as a spectrum from this early days strategy to actually executing and, working with a developer, we don't do a ton of coding as design at Asana currently.
But you do some.
A little bit. The tech stack is not super easy to get into. We're developing a system that should allow us to get more hands on in the code. And we certainly have some people who have contributed.
For a long while, we had a front-end developer that was part of the design team.
Yeah, and then we sent him to develop the good UI vibes with the rest of the engineering team. Dean is great.
Trojan horse.
A little bit. So for us, when we think of that spectrum, each person will sort of spike and valley in different places. Some folks who are super visual, like you're a super visual designer, generally speaking. And you have some people who come from a very different background where they're almost more like a PM when you kind of squint at them. And the reality is we don't want, we need a balance. So if you look at the team and the spectrum, we want like a nice sort of even balance of all those skills. So when we think about building, it's less about like, we need to have someone who can do everything, and more looking at the team as a whole and being like, well, where are we feeling weaker or stronger? And how do we sort of assess for folks who might better fill out that profile? You could also think of that at like a program level as well. There are certain programs that are very system-centric. That are way less execution-centric. And those are good times to find someone who's, more on the UX side, for lack of a better way of putting it.
And how do you analyze, like, what are you on that scale?
Yeah, so we developed competencies last year to help with career growth, and we try to use those competencies not just in conversations with existing employees, but also using them to assess people in the interview process. So, if this all works perfectly, which, art and science with recruiting, but ideally you are being assessed on the same competencies that you will be assessed on throughout your time at Asana. And for us, we have 5, only one of them is craft. So craft is everything to do with like execution, interaction, like details, things like that. But the other 4 are focused more on that soft skill side. So you have things like empathy and analysis, which is all about thinking about quantitative and qualitative insights. How much are you involved in that process? How much are you pulling those in and changing your design. We even call influence, which is all about presentation style and feedback. How do you work with stakeholders? How do you present your work and justify and show your rigor? We have another one on team building. That one tends to be like a lot about sort of team culture, recruiting. A lot of the management skills exist in that competency. And then another one about velocity, which is, put really tritely, is the balance of quality and speed. Can you use the process to build great product, but not necessarily taking forever to do it? So product adherence is or process adherence is kind of involved in that. So we use those skills to kind of look across the team on an individual level, a group level, and then we also use that to assess candidates. And then there's obviously a sliding scale inside of that around what does this look like across different levels of expertise.
Mm-hmm. Super interesting, actually. So we are with the 25 design team.
Yeah.
Who do you interact with? You mentioned PMs, you mentioned engineers, you mentioned a bunch of other people.
For me personally, I interact with a lot of different people around the company. Design is a lot of the reason that people being customers quote for choosing us. It's also been to some degree, I would say, our edge, especially relative to a lot of our customers or competitors, I should say. So for me, because we straddle both the brand and product side, it means that I'm obviously deeply partnered with the head of product, but I'm also partnered with the head of marketing. I partner with people in business. The brand team works with a bunch of people from sales and customer ops and customer success and education. So while my main partners tend to be like head of product, head of marketing, tend to be my two really big key points, and then obviously the design leadership on the team as well. So for me, it's keeping context on ideally everything that's going on at the company. Mm-hmm. So delegation becomes pretty important. I'm not seeing every single video we do for education, but knowing that design is involved in that is really important. Mm-hmm. That's a touch that we need to probably double down on more than anything else. So, sort of like you were describing earlier, with enterprise companies traditionally being pretty sales driven, mm-hmm. pretty, not super product forward. Mm-hmm. I think we've seen with folks like Slack and Trello and Airtable to some extent, design is becoming a lot more core of these companies. And while that's been something we've been able to rely on in the past, it's really important in the future that I think our responsibility as a design team is to double down on that. Mm-hmm. Because what was unique will then become commonplace. And if we're not pushing the boundaries there, mm-hmm. it will no longer be something that customers quote as the reason they chose us.
I want to go back to one of the things that you said, you were talking about your position, other positions, what's a hierarchy in Asana? I think that's a very juicy comment, so a juicy thing to talk about.
Yeah, historically speaking, Asana is a flat org, and I think we've seen through growth that some of our systems are working and some of them aren't. So there's a degree of recognition that there still are levels of abstraction that exist, and there needs to be a path where things escalate to kind of a white space role. So my role in a nutshell is if anything in design is wrong, I am 100% accountable for that, which means that, there is a degree of hierarchy there. There are managers, there are reports. And we've been thinking a lot about how our culture and systems need to develop as we scale without necessarily losing the part of us that there's a really strong belief at Asana in general that anyone should be able to say anything about anything. And the moment you institute too much hierarchy, you will discourage people who are lower in the totem pole from feeling like they have a voice. So a lot of what we're trying to balance is how do we grow while keeping that goodness inside? And it would be, it has been a bit of a challenge. And I think we've seen, do we want titles? Do we not? These are conversations that we have on a really regular cadence to make sure that we're doing the right thing for us and the right stage of growth that we're at.
What's the representation of design in the executive team?
Depends on how you define the executive team, because we don't have a C-suite proper. Okay. The same way that you.
But there must be something that looks like an executive team.
I think maybe the closest thing for us is company planning. The reality for me, so effectively, I'm the person who would be representing at a company level. The thing that has always surprised and delighted me about Asana is there's never a lack of access if I need it. I think the big challenge for me as we grow is to learn what my influence needs to be. When you're small, it's easy, right? You know everyone, you can talk to everyone. It's really easy to have that influence. As you grow, the company gets bigger and there's more people involved. And, not a new leader. Like I've been doing leadership for a long time, but leading at the scale is a new thing for me. So learning how to like exert that influence and be where I need to be as a designer to make sure the company's doing the right thing is something that's very much on me. So whether or not I sit in like every company planning meeting does not mean that I can't. It doesn't mean that I can't be like, oh, hey, I have this thing we need to talk about, or I'm not involved in these big strategic discussions. And ultimately, like we are a product-led company, and I am deeply, deeply involved in the development of that roadmap. And I think that in a lot of ways is like the most influential place a designer can be at somewhere like Asana.
Perfect. Roadmap. Let's stay there.
Okay.
So how does the roadmap look like? Where does it come from? So imagine we're done with everything that was in the roadmap. A new roadmap needs to come, or an iteration of it needs to come. What happens?
I think it's going to change, honestly, in the future. So historically, like a lot of that was driven. Justin was a huge part of that, and there's a video where he details the vision of Asana for the next couple of years. That his, we're slowly plotting through. Well, not even slowly plotting through that. We're actually quickly plotting through it, and anyone can watch that. We publicly posted it a bit over a year ago. So historically, I think a lot of it came from him, and it wasn't just him like sitting in the woods coming up with this on his own. It was a collaboration, but like he drove a lot of it. And we're shifting now to more like the product team owns that roadmap. And that means designers and PMs are working together to sort of look, in conjunction with business to look at where the right place for us to go is. So the trite answer is it's collaboration. Like the roadmap
How long is the roadmap? Is it a 3 month roadmap, 1 month, 1 year, 10 years?
We definitely plan. A year is very easy to see. And I'd say right now, like we're pretty good at seeing out 2. Asana, I think, has been really good at seeing out like 10 for a really long time. Ambition is definitely like something the leaders have done a pretty good job of, like really doubling down on like, no, we're not just here for tech companies. No, we want to make work better for literally everyone who does work.
Yeah, but that's like the mission, like the strategy. If you want. For us, how does this transform into product initiatives or at a high level?
So it's a collaboration between business and product to decide like what is strategically important right now. What are the things that we think are vital to our mission? What are things that are maybe inhibiting customer deals? So we try to take in a whole batch of this to actually form our roadmap. So one of the ways we work with the business teams is they have a committee that basically develops a list, and it's all the customer-facing teams, that's sales, that's marketing, that's customer, like all of them will come together and they basically come up with a list which is like, hey,
it's a wish list.
Yeah, it's like we're hearing all this stuff from the customers. Here are the problems we see. We're going to rank them for you, and like we want you to consider these in the roadmap. That's certainly a very large input.
That will be a public thing. Like they will show that to like everyone in the company.
Yeah,
there's like every now and then. We had like the future Asana presentations where Justin will do like that and talk about each of those points and how much of a pain those were.
Yeah. Okay, so once this is in process, this goes to product design, engineering.
Yeah, it goes to, so there's a group called the product planning group, and that's a cohort of research, design, I touched the table, research, design, engineering, and PM. And
you reorder this list, you prioritize it.
It's an input to the overall roadmap. Okay. So it would be a false statement to say that we take that list and we just rejigger it for the roadmap. Because there's certainly things that, there's an amount of reaction that customers have, and then there's an amount of stuff that we think is proactively important or strategically important that we need to have in the roadmap. Or it could be something like infrastructurally or core to our experience that no one's going to call out specifically, but we know is important based on a bunch of different sort of inputs. So primarily, like what we want to drive the roadmap for is customer insight. And the business teams give us a really great insight into our existing customers or the customers that maybe we didn't win. But then the product team really needs to be doing a lot of this research proactively to say, like, what are the opportunities for us? What are the customer pains that maybe we haven't discreetly identified through the customer-facing teams, and how do we capitalize on those? So it's sort of a hybrid of those. And generally speaking, we're looking out a whole year for initiatives in a pretty concrete way. Okay. And then we have kind of like a backlog, if you will, beyond that, that we will rejigger.
How big or how small are these initiatives? Are they like 1 month initiatives, 3 month initiative? Like each one of them, how long does it take to execute on them?
A mix is the answer.
So something between those two numbers.
Yeah, I mean, some of our initiatives will be quite long. Like Timeline was a pretty long, I don't remember how many months it was. Yeah, exactly. Like that was probably 8 months.
That was like a long time.
It was probably like from
we also did Timeline, and we actually called it Timeline, a red booth.
I know. Like, but I remember like when the project started, and like we had the vision of Timeline when I joined Asana. That was like 2014. We started executing on that in 2016 because we needed like to fix other things before we got into that. So the vision was there long before we get there.
Yeah, in some ways, like what brought it up to the top was more knowing that it became important. It was timely, effectively. Like if you look at the things we could build, there's a massive,
always infinite.
Yeah, exactly that. So a lot of that business input and customer insights is to help us whittle that list down, or at least rejigger it in a way where, yes, we now know we're going to build. But for timeline, that's something that's like a very large project. You could see portfolios that were released in November, also one of those bigger projects. But then we have a bunch of teams working on things that are smaller. We're not super, we do experiment in growth, but we don't have like a massive growth team. But we do think a lot about adoption. So you'll see those teams taking on like smaller things, like maybe we'll try a couple of ways to, better the new user experience. And that might be a month, a couple of months.
What is adoption?
Adoption for us is, basically, can we retain the customers we bring in? So when you come to Asana, a big challenge for us is like, well, especially historically, Asana is really flexible. And it can be very hard to tell what the value of it is unless you come with a really, really strong idea of what you want to do. And if you're not that person, you might be like, cool, don't know how this is going to help me, and you bounce out. So a lot of adoption is thinking like, how do you show that value? How do you show someone in the first, 2 minutes, 30 days, 60 days, what they could be getting out of it? And that plays into not only how we educate people. We launched a bunch of templates more recently that you can actually like search on Google and find and like get into really quickly. That's a really concrete way of saying like, oh, you were looking for a marketing launch calendar. Here's a way you can do that. And that's something we hadn't paid off as well as we could have in the past. So a lot of adoption there's a bunch of initiatives for us inside of adoption, because that's, a lot of ways, one of the big ways for us to get better and better serve our customers.
So I'm assuming you have a formal definition of adoption, right? So
yes.
An adopted company is a sign up that does this, and that.
Yeah.
So how does this look like? Like they need to do a certain activities or events bring on more people on board?
There's activities within a period of time, basically. Okay. So how sticky are we being? And I won't go into like the little nitty gritty
the numbers are not relevant.
But yeah, basically there's a time frame, which is like we want people to be successful in this time frame, and success means I think we call them like collaboration metrics, but it's basically a couple of key events which key us into like, oh, they're doing the things that makes people successful.
So once they do that, they're probably going to stay using the product for a while and potentially convert into paid customer at some conversion rate. Yeah,
ideally, we have a trialing process now. So ideally,
but it's also freemium.
Yes.
So you have free forever, but trial of the paid version for a while.
And then into free. Because a lot of like understanding how the features work together in our more premium offerings is tough to sell unless you really see it. So having a trial means you can actually go in and you can...
Did you always have a trial?
No, it's new.
Oh, okay.
In the last 8 months.
I didn't know. So on Abstract for, in the industry or space of products like Asana, like B2B... SaaS for SME and growing organizations, what do you think is a good and bad retention rate for or how do you say adoption rates? What percentage of free signups do you think should adopt?
I don't have a great number for that.
Like, what's a range that you think like it should never be less than that? And I find it very, very hard to go beyond that. Just a range.
I don't know that I have a hard range I'd be willing to give you right now.
Okay.
Because I think it can vary.
So do you think 10% is reasonable?
Like 10% from...
10% of all the signups adopt? Like they do whatever key events are? Or do you think that's way too high?
I'm gonna throw one there. I think that's hard in
this space, I'm talking.
In this space, well, but it still depends. Well, like it's different. Like
I know who I'd ask to get that number.
Yeah, but like we have people for that.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, I assume that it depends on the company a lot, and like, I know you mean the space. The space is wide.
We definitely have ranges for things like what do we think a good trial conversion rate is? Like undoubtedly, I am in this moment having been on vacation for 2 weeks, being like, I'm not going to give you a number, but we certainly do have ranges that we deem acceptable. Like when we were going into the trials process, we knew based on competitive companies in that are adjacent to us, we knew what theirs were, so that gave us a benchmark to rate how we were doing. And I think a lot of that, to your point, is like there is a number that people believe, and a lot of it I think is us having people from peer companies, knowing people at peer companies, but really looking at that peer company set and saying, what did they do, and is that we'll define a range based on that. So you can kind of look at a peer group of companies. get the data you can get, and then you can form your ranges based on that. And then those are obviously informed by like our own best instincts and things like that as well.
Do you think that the aha moment of like realizing like, okay, I understand this now, like it can vary a lot that much, and that's why you don't know that well? I'm
being cagey because I don't know the number off the top of my head. Like we definitely have a lot of ways that we analyze the funnel, and we have areas that we think are success or failure. 100%.
One last question because we're running out of time. Does product design have a goal, like a numeric goal? Like, we did 24 and we need to do 32 by December of whatever?
We don't have a lot of pure KRs like that. I think the closest thing we would have is NPS. So
for the design team,
for the product design side specifically. So obviously, like all product designers on their programs, the programs will have very discrete KRs that are metrics oriented. As a team, I think it's something we've honestly struggled a little bit with, which is like, what is our team mandate metric that we want to change?
How do you measure success?
Yeah. And I think that it's been very easy to rely on, like, we have KRs are super prevalent at Asana in general. So it's very easy. We have a lot of well-defined objectives, and those ladder down to KRs, and they're for the most part very metric centric. So that we can look at those and be like, well, I know that my product was a success because I built this feature and we hit our KRs. So in that way, like all product designers on programs will have KRs that they are accountable for, in the sense of the team together is accountable for them. As a design team specifically, NPS is the only one I would pick out, and it would be probably false to say that design owns NPS because it's not up to design to be the only people moving that. But for me, I think NPS is a good representation of the general quality of what we're putting out there. So I think that's, for me at least, something that I key into a lot and something I would love to see rise, because I think that's a good leading indicator of better metrics overall.
And what would you think is the goal for product management?
Product management as an org is, I think why...
ARR obviously is the ultimate goal, I guess.
One of our objectives is certainly ARR. I think a PM's job in general is to basically find goals to get, to galvanize the team and encourage the team and hold the line to make sure we're all moving towards those goals. I think a lot of product design's job is to manifest the solution. We're in a lot of ways the front door of everything. And then for engineering, I think obviously they're implementing the thing, but it's also up to them to we involve engineers really early in the process. Like they're there helping us set these objectives. They're there sitting in on user research sessions. They're there thinking about what problem statements we're working at. And so for them, I think obviously the responsibility is to make sure it's good, but it's also to service technical constraints, to think of clever ways to make sure these things are being implemented in a robust way, but also a quick way, making sure that it fits in with sort of that larger infrastructure that we built. So PMs for me are they're the ones that are making sure the boat is pointed in the right direction. And for us, we think a lot about sort of role blending, right? So in the case that there's some disagreement and, maybe the designer and the engineer disagree, the PM can help tie break. In the case that the whole team is kind of rattling a little bit, well, we have pillar leadership to kind of help and be like, cool, let's talk about it. Let's find the best desirable outcome. So ideally, it's not I own this, you own this other person owns this. We really want everyone to feel no, I own the problem and I'm excited about solving this customer pain for people. And that's no more PM than it is designer than it is engineer. So we do talk a lot about role blending and feeling certainly we have responsibilities, but we're not siloing ourselves away from each other. Same reason we all the teams sit together, in close proximity, which helps a lot.
I think that's a good point to finish it. Leave it there.
Good. We'll do that. Thank you so much, Tyson.
Thank you.
It was great having you, and see you next week.
Suscribíos a nuestro podcast en youtube.com/Itnig, Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, iVoox y otras plataformas para no perderos ningún episodio. También lo podéis recibir en vuestro correo suscribiéndoos a nuestra newsletter en itnig.net.